All right. Let's dive into something that I think a lot of us struggle with these days, especially if you're like me and spend way too much time on the computer. Wrist pain. We're talking carpal tunnel, stiffness, all that fun stuff. And we're going beyond just like basic stretches here.
Right.
We're going deep. I've got this guide here all about joint health and mobility, and it has some really interesting stuff that I think could help a lot of people.
It does. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't realize is that there's so much more you can do than just take a painkiller or, hope it goes away on its own.
Exactly. And like we all know, typing and scrolling on our phones all day isn't great for our wrists, but it's more than just overuse, right?
It is. It's the way we use them.
Yeah.
Think about how much time we spend in these like really weird positions. Our wrists just kind of like stuck there.
Yeah.
The guide actually calls it our muscles becoming adaptively short and stiff. It's like they're getting molded into that shape,
Oh, wow.
which is obviously not ideal for movement.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So it's like our bodies are kind of working against us, even though they're trying to adapt. So what's the solution? Can't we just like stretch it out?
I mean, stretching helps, but it's not the whole picture. We really need to like unglue those tissues, almost like flossing them out to get that range of motion back.
Okay, so I'm picturing dental floss for my wrist. That's a new one. So the guide lays out what it calls 2 prescriptions. Tell me about the first one.
Okay, so prescription A is all about quick relief. So if you're like busy, short on time, but you need to do something about your wrist, this is the one. It's called banded wrist distraction.
That sounds a little intimidating. What is that exactly?
It's way simpler than it sounds. So basically imagine you have a resistance band. You just gently pull it through the wrist joint to kind of like floss it out, create space, help it move better.
I'm starting to get it. So how long do you have to do that for?
Like 1 to 2 minutes per wrist. It's really quick and easy, and you can pretty much do it anywhere.
Perfect for those busy days. So that's our quick fix. But what if it's like a little more chronic? Like what if it's something that keeps coming back?
That's where prescription B comes in. That's more of a comprehensive approach, for people who really want to get to the root of the problem and like prevent it from happening again.
I like the sound of that. So where do we even begin with that?
Interestingly, it starts with the forearms.
Oh.
Yeah. A lot of wrist pain actually comes from tightness in the forearms. It's all connected. Those tight muscles can pull on the tendons that go through the wrist, and that's what causes the pain and stiffness.
So we need to loosen up the forearms to free up the wrists. That makes sense. So what do we do?
So the guide calls it smash and floss. Basically, you're going to use tools like a lacrosse ball or those yoga tune-up balls to like apply pressure and movement to specific muscles in your forearms to break up those adhesions and get things moving again.
Okay. I like it. So the guide mentions 4 specific techniques.
Yeah.
Let's break those down. What's the first one?
So the first one is called forearm tack and twist. And that one's really good for acute pain. Like say you were just on the computer for hours and your wrist is killing you. You take a lacrosse ball and like tack down those tissues near your elbow, and then you just twist your arm to create some movement and release that tension.
Oh, so we're not even on the wrist yet.
Not yet.
We're up at the elbow.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. What's next?
So the next one is forearm extensor smash. And for this one, we're going to use those yoga tune-up balls. Those are a little bit smaller and softer.
Okay.
Which lets you really pinpoint those muscles on the back of your forearm that are responsible for extending your wrist. So you just apply pressure with the balls and then move your arm to create that smashing motion.
So you're targeting those muscles that help you like extend your wrist.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense because we're always flexing them. What's the third one?
All right, so this one's a little more intense. It's called forearm stack and smash. You're actually going to stack 2 lacrosse balls on top of each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to get a deep big pressure.
Yeah.
Double whammy. And for this one, we're targeting
Both the front and the back of the forearm. So you work on both sides, the anterior and the posterior compartment.
Okay.
To release tension throughout the whole forearm.
Got it. 3 down. What's the last one?
Okay. This one you might need a little help with. It's called Super Friend Forearm Smash.
Super friend. Now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah, it's especially good after like a really intense workout,
Right.
if you're gripping weights or doing pulling exercises. You're basically going to have a friend, a super friend.
Huh? Okay.
Help you out with this one.
So what does this super friend do?
They're going to use their foot to apply pressure to your forearm.
Oh, wow.
Which will allow you to get a much deeper release than you could on your own. I know it sounds weird, but it's super effective.
Right. So we've got 4 different smash and floss techniques for the forearms. So that's taking care of the root of the problem. But what about the wrist itself?
That's where the wrist tack and spin comes in. You're actually going to work directly on the wrist joint itself with this one.
Okay, so we're finally at the wrist. Tell me about this tack and spin thing.
It's actually pretty similar to those forearm techniques, but this time you're using the lacrosse ball or the yoga tune-up ball right on your wrist.
Got it.
Find those tight spots, tack them down with the ball, and then you just spin your wrist around to kind of break up those adhesions and get things moving again.
So it's all about ungluing everything that's gotten, glued together from being on the computer all the time and using our phones.
Exactly. And this one is especially good if you're having pain at the base of your thumb, like right here.
Yeah.
Which is a really common symptom of carpal tunnel.
Makes sense. We're always gripping things,
Yeah.
typing, scrolling.
Yeah, the guide actually uses the term laminated to describe what happens to these tissues. They get all stuck together and they can't glide smoothly anymore, which is what causes the pain and the stiffness.
Laminated. That sounds intense. So this tack and spin is kind of like peeling those layers apart so they can move freely again.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's all about restoring that natural fluidity to the wrist.
One thing I really liked about all these techniques is that they don't take that long to do.
Yeah.
Even with prescription B, with all the forearm stuff and the wrist mobilization, it's only like 12 minutes.
Yeah, it's really not bad at all. It's like you can easily fit that into your day, even if you're super busy.
It's like brushing your teeth for your wrist.
Yeah.
A few minutes a day can make a huge difference.
Totally. It's about being proactive.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting until your wrist is already hurting, take a few minutes each day to keep things moving and prevent that pain from starting in the first place.
So you're saying consistency is key.
Absolutely. Just like with anything else, it's like you don't brush your teeth once and expect to be good forever. You gotta keep doing it to maintain those healthy habits.
So it's about making that shift, from being reactive to being proactive with our health.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that chronic pain isn't just a physical thing. It affects us mentally and emotionally too.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It's anxiety-inducing. It impacts everything we do.
Yeah, and it can affect our mood, our sleep, even our relationships.
So what can we do about that? Are there things we can do alongside these physical techniques to help manage those emotional and mental aspects of chronic pain?
Definitely. Things like mindfulness and meditation are super helpful. Even just taking a few minutes each day to just breathe deeply can make a huge difference.
It's not just about sitting down and meditating for an hour though, right?
Right. It can be as simple as taking a few deep breaths before a meeting or paying attention to how your body feels when you're walking or stretching. Just bringing that awareness to your breath can really calm your mind.
And I imagine that doing things that bring us joy can help too.
Totally.
Okay.
Whatever that looks like for you, whether it's listening to music, spending time in nature, or hanging out with loved ones, make time for those things that bring you joy and help you de-stress.
And it's okay to ask for help, right? If you're struggling, you don't have to go through it alone.
Absolutely. Talking to a therapist or joining a support group can be really helpful. Just having that space to share your experience with people who understand what you're going through can make a world of difference.
It sounds like addressing wrist pain or any kind of chronic pain really required a holistic approach.
I think so. We need to look at the mental and the emotional aspects of it.
I feel like this conversation has really expanded my understanding of wrist pain. It's more than just a physical issue. It's like a whole body experience.
I'm glad to hear that. And I hope our listeners are feeling empowered to take a more proactive approach to their health and well-being.
Me too. Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to talk about something that really stood out to me in this guide. It talked about the connection between wrist pain and our smartphones.
Oh, yeah. The smartphone dilemma.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The things that are supposed to connect us and make our lives easier are actually causing us pain.
I know, right? But think about it. We're constantly scrolling and typing and holding our phones in this fixed grip. It puts a lot of stress on our wrists.
Yeah, it's like the perfect recipe for wrist problems.
Totally. The repetitive motions, the static postures, the gripping, it all adds up.
I bet that's contributing to that laminated tissue thing we were talking about earlier.
For sure. It's almost like we're molding our wrists to the shape of our phones.
It's a little scary when you think about it. So what can we do? Should we all just get rid of our smartphones?
I don't think that's necessary. But we can definitely be more mindful of how we use them.
Okay, like what? What are some things we can do?
Well, for one, pay attention to your posture. Make sure you're not hunching over or holding your phone in a way that strains your wrist. Try to keep your wrist neutral as much as possible.
So no more scrolling through Instagram in bed with my wrist bent at a 90-degree angle.
Probably a good idea. Sit up straight, support your arm so your wrist isn't doing all the work, and take breaks. Put the phone down every once in a while and stretch your fingers and your wrist.
That's good advice. What else?
Try using your non-dominant hand more often. I know it sounds weird, but it can really help to distribute the workload and prevent overuse injuries.
So like switch hands when I'm scrolling or texting.
Exactly. It might feel awkward at first, but your wrists will thank you later.
These are all great tips. I already feel more aware of how I'm using my phone just talking about it.
That's awesome. Awareness is the first step. Once you know the potential risks, you can start making those little changes that can really make a big difference.
This has been so helpful. We've learned so much about wrist pain and how it affects us.
It's been a great conversation, but we're not done yet. There's still more to explore in our deep dive.
Okay, we're back. It's amazing how much we've learned about wrist pain already, from all those crazy techniques to the smartphone stuff.
I know, right? It's wild how everything's connected.
Totally. And like one thing that keeps coming up is this idea of ungluing those tissues in our forearms and wrists.
It's a good way to think about it, right? Because it all comes back to movement. Like our bodies are meant to move.
Yeah, but we don't. I mean, I spend so much time sitting at my desk or on the couch or even like just standing around.
Exactly. And all that stillness makes those tissues adapt and get all tight and stiff and stuck. And that's when the pain starts.
So it's not just about the exercises, but also moving more in general.
Exactly. The exercises are great for getting things moving again, but we got to keep moving, you know? Make it a part of our everyday life.
Okay, I get that, but what does that actually look like? Like, do I need to go run a marathon?
Haha. No, not unless you want to. It's really about just finding little ways to move throughout the day.
Okay. So like getting up from my desk and walking around.
Yeah. Set a timer on your phone to remind yourself to stand up every hour or so. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Simple stuff like that.
But what about when I'm like stuck at my desk working?
There's still stuff you can do, like try a standing desk or even just stand up when you're on the phone. And you can always do some stretches at your desk, wrist circles, shoulder rolls, neck tilts. Just move.
I like that. Just incorporating it into those little moments throughout the day makes it feel less like a chore.
Exactly. Even those little movements add up over time.
This is really eye-opening. It's like a totally different way of thinking about movement.
It is. And it's not just about feeling better physically either. Moving more can help with stress and improve your mood and focus.
It's like a win-win-win. Okay, as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with something to think about. What if, instead of thinking of movement as something we have to do, we thought of it as like a gift?
I love that. It's like a way to honor and appreciate our bodies.
Yeah. Because moving is a privilege. And when we think of it that way, it can be something we actually enjoy and get energy from.
That's beautiful. I think that's the perfect way to end this deep dive.
I agree. So to our listeners, embrace the power of movement. Find little ways to weave it into your day and appreciate it for the gift that it is.
You got it. And remember, you have the power to create a life that's free from pain and full of movement. So go out there and do it.
Until next time, happy exploring.